How can you multiply two decimals? Think about this question during the lesson. Nancy walked 1 7/10 miles in 1 hour. If she walks at the same rate, how far will she walk in 1 5/10 hours? What operation will you use to find out how far Nancy walked in 1 5/10 hours at the rate of 1 7/10 miles? To find out how far Nancy walked, multiply. Find 1 7/10 times 1 5/10. This model shows 1 7/10 times 1 5/10. The factor at the top of the model shows Nancy's walk rate, 1 7/10 miles per hour. Now looking at the grids, what do the top row grids represent? The grid on the left represents the multiplication of the ones digit in 1 7/10 by the ones digit in 1 5/10. Then the grid on the right represents the multiplication of the tenths digit in 1 7/10 by the ones digit in 1 5/10. What factor is on the left side of the model and what does it represent? The factor on the left side of the model represents the length of time Nancy walks, 1 5/10 hours. What do the grids in the bottom row represent? The grid on the left represents the multiplication of the ones digit in 1 7/10 by the tenths digit in 1 5/10. Then the grid on the right represents the multiplication of the tenths digit in 1 7/10 by the tenths digit in 1 5/10. You can also read this model in terms of partial products as 1 times 1, 1 times 5/10, 1 times 7/10, and 7/10 times 5/10. Before you find the exact answer, estimate the product. Round 1 7/10 and 1 5/10. Both factors round to 2, so the estimated product is 4. Remember this estimate, as you will refer to it later to check the reasonableness of your answer. Now that you have an estimate, multiply as you would with whole numbers. What are the partial products? The partial products are 85 and 170. Are the partial products in tenths or hundredths? Why? The partial products are in hundredths because multiplying tenths times tenths equals hundredths. Count decimal places in both factors. Write the decimal point in the product. Where will you place the decimal point? The decimal point will go between the 2 and 5. What is your answer? The answer for the final product is 2 55 hundredths. Now that you have an exact answer, you should check your answer. Why is it a good idea to check your answer? Because if your exact answer is close to your estimate, you know that your answer is reasonable. Also, if your exact answer is not close to your estimate, then you can look at your multiplication and see if you. Since 2 55 hundredths is close to your estimate of 4, the answer is reasonable. Nancy could walk 2 55/100 miles in 1 5/10 hours, walking at a rate of 1 7/10 miles per hour. Now you know how to multiply two decimals.
Hello, my friends. Okay, today we are going to continue our work with multiplying decimals, and we are going to work on multiplying two decimals. Now, if you guys worked on yesterday's lesson, lesson 2, and you were like, all right, cool, I get this, then today's lesson is not going to be any more difficult. So we're going to follow the same kind of order and the same kind of steps that we did for multiplying a decimal by a whole number, but now we just have two sets of decimals. So here's what we're going to do first. So I have on the screen a problem, 1.3 or 1 3/10 times 1.8 or 1 8/10. So what I'm going to do, I notice that there's decimals in each one of these numbers. Each number is a decimal number. Same step. First thing I want to do is I want to ignore the decimal, and I'm going to multiply them like they were regular numbers. So I'm going to multiply them like it was 13 times 18. I'm going to ignore those little old decimals. I'm going to pretend they're not even there. So let's do a very simple multiplication problem. I can do 13 times 18. That's simple. 13 times 18, I'm going to start with the 8, multiply by the 1s. 8 times 3 is 24. Put down the 4, carry the 2. Now I'm going to do 8 times 1, which is 8, plus 2 is 10. So my first product is 104. Now what I'm going to do is move on over and work with the 1. That 1 is really a 10. So I want to take the 0 from the 10 and put it down here. So now I can just multiply with the 1. I multiply this 1 by the 1's place in my top number, which is 3. 1 times 3 is 3. 1 times 1 is 1. So I have my two partial products. Now I'm going to add them back together. So I get 4, 3, 2. All right, so 13 times 18, real easy, that's 234. So that part was really simple. All I'm going to do is I'm going to take my decimals, ignore them, and then do some basic multiplication. Now, here's what I want to do. I need to put my decimals back. So remember, I have a decimal here, and I have a decimal here. All right, now here's what I want to do. I want to come down the right side of my number, I want to stop at the end of my number, and I want to, just like we did yesterday, count the number of spaces in. This decimal is sitting one place in, so one place in. But now, here's the difference. When I'm multiplying two decimals, I also want to count the number of places this decimal is. So same thing, this decimal is also one place in. So I have one seat over, one place in for 1.3, and in 1.8, my decimal is one place in. Now, all I want to do is put them together. So if I have 1 from my top number and 1 from my bottom number, that's 2 places total. So now all I want to do is come down here to my bottom number, and I'm going to start at the end and move over 2 decimal places. 1, 2. Put my decimal point back, and now I have my final answer, 2.34, or 2 34/100. The only difference between multiplying by a whole number and multiplying by another decimal is you have to count both sets of decimal places. So really, this is super simple. It's the same as what we did yesterday. We're just counting the decimal places now in both numbers. So whenever you're multiplying decimals, you want to count the number of decimal places in any number that has a decimal point. So we're going to count the number of spaces over in both 1.3, that's one place, and in 1.8, that's one place, and put them together, and I get 2. Now in my answer, I have to count over 2 decimal places. Let's try that with another one. So let's do 0.23 times 1.6. We'll do some basic numbers, so we won't do anything too crazy. All right, so same thing. I want to ignore the decimals, and if I ignore the decimals, pretend they're not there, I get 23 times 16. That's easy. I can handle that. 23 times 16. Start with the 6. 6 times 3 is 18. Put down the 8. Carry the 1. Circle it. 6 times 2 is 12. Plus 1 is 13. So my first piece is 138. Now I'm going to move over and work with the 1. That's 1/10 or 10, so I have to put down my 0. Now I can multiply by my 1's place. 1 times 3 is 3. 1 times 2 is 2. Now I'm going to add my pieces together, and I get 8, 6. I get 368. Now, here's where we need to put the decimals back. My decimal is here, and my decimal is here. So what I want to do is I want to start with my top number. How many places over, how many seats over is that decimal sitting? Well, the decimal is sitting 1, 2 seats over. You can even write the number here tiny so you don't forget. And then come down here to 1.6. That decimal is sitting 1 space over. So if I put those spaces, the total number of seats, I get 3 seats, 3 spaces total. So then I'm going to come down to my answer, start at the end, and go 1, 2, 3. Put down my decimal. Don't forget we need a 0 in the front. So my final answer is 0 and 368 thousandths. Super simple. Multiply like they were regular whole numbers, and then just like we did in lesson 2, count the number of decimal seats or the decimal places that we have over, but now you need to just count them for both numbers since both numbers are decimals. Then you put the total number of seats that were sitting over, put them together, and then count that number of seats in your final answer. Let's try one more. I want you guys to try this one on your own. So let's try 0.25 times 2.9. All right. Go ahead and try this problem on your own. You can pause the recording, solve the problem, make sure you're writing it out on paper, and then what I want you to do at the end is press play and see if you get it right. Go ahead and try that now. Work carefully, and I know you guys can get it. All right, guys, you think you got it right? Let's check it out and see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend first that those decimal places don't exist. I'm going to ignore them. I'm going to pretend they're not there. And if I ignore them, I get 25 times 29. Oh my gosh, dude, I can do multiplication higher than that. 25 times 29 is easy. Let's try it out. So 25 times 29, multiply that normally. Start with the 9. 9 times 5 is 45. Put down the 5, carry the 4, and circle it so you don't forget about it. 9 times 2 is 18. 18 plus 4 is 22. So my first piece is 225. All right, now I'm going to work with the 2. That 2 is really 2 tens or 20. So I want to take the 0 and put it down here. And now I can multiply like it's just a normal old 2. 2 times 5, we multiply by the 1's place first. 2 times 5 is 10. Put down the 0, carry the 1. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 plus 1 is 5. Now I'm going to add my pieces together, and I get 5, 2, 7. So I get 725. Perfect. Now the last step, all I need to do is put my decimal places back. My decimal was here. My decimal was here. If I start at the end, you don't want to start at the beginning. You start at the end of 0.25 or 25 hundredths. If I start at the end and count the number of places over, my decimal is 1, 2 places to the left. Make a little note. And in 2.9, my decimal is 1 place to the left. So together, that gives me 3 places total. So I want to take that 3 places, and I want to come down to my answer, my product, which was 725. Start at the end, we're starting on the right-hand side, and go 3 places to the left. 1, 2, 3. Put your decimal place, or your decimal point, and don't forget we have to have a 0 in the front. We have to have a 0 to represent how many whole numbers we have. So our final answer is 725 thousandths, or 0.725. Did you guys get it right? I'm sure you did. So I told you multiplying by decimals really isn't that hard. All you need to do is count some dots, count the number of spaces where your dots are located, and put the dot or the decimal point back at the end. Go ahead and practice a couple problems on your own, and I will see you for our lesson. Good luck, everybody, and great job.